Hey, everybody. Hope you're doing well. This is a short live stream. Feel free to say hi. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're from. You can just type it in the chat box. And this live stream is called What is Your Burning Question? And it's kind of got two intentions. So one is I'm just going to be answering questions for a short time live. So if you have a burning question, feel free to type it here in the chat box. And the other piece that I'm doing is just letting you know, if you didn't know, I'm part of something. I created something called the Ask Jack community, which is a community that gets together twice a month for 2 live calls, about 90 minutes to 2 hours, which is a place where I can dig deeper to really answer your questions. I can bring you on camera and can ask you some clarifying questions and just kind of get deeper into things than I can necessarily just with the text answers that I do for my occasional live streams here. So I just wanted to let you know about that. Feel free to ask me any questions if you have any questions about that. I'll actually just go ahead and post a link here. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, Jennifer and Jennifer. One from Houston, one from Cleveland. Welcome. I'm probably going to be here for, 10 or 15 minutes. So let me know if there's anything that's going on for you that I can answer or help you with. I hope you've had great weeks and you're looking forward to your weekends. We had snow here in Colorado, the first of the season yesterday. And today it's all been melting in the sunshine. So it's beautiful and winter's coming. And that's not just a Game of Thrones reference. Oh, hi, Yvette. Hey, I didn't realize you're in New Zealand. That's fun. Thanks for tuning in. Curious what time it is in New Zealand. So you probably know, if you've followed me a little bit, that my general philosophy when I'm trying to help people in relationship or get into relationship is to really trust in being yourself. And then the question really becomes, well, how do you be yourself, and what does it mean to be yourself, and why aren't we ourselves? And one distinction that I've been making for a lot of clients recently is, being yourself when you're alone is a different thing than being yourself when you're in relationship. So there's often some learning edges that come up there where, particularly if you're an introverted type, and I'm a more extroverted type that is definitely more introverted now, and I think I get it more, where you might spend a lot of time on your own, or maybe you're sensitive, or maybe you just prefer your own company. And you kind of get on quite well with that. And then you come into a relationship and it's like, oh, something else can happen. So that's why I'm really excited about this intersection of relationship and authenticity, relationship and being yourself and being real, because it feels like the real expression of being yourself is when we're able to take it out into the world and do it with other people. And that's where we also get our edges reflected. That's where our wounds get activated. That's where our defenses come up. And it's kind of where the rubber hits the road. For any of us that are on a path of growth and awakening, my sense is the relationship is really the territory. Right? That it's like, if you want to be a spiritual person or a growing person or an integrated person, the relationship is the fast path. You knew it was coming. Is the fast path to growth, and it's the kind of thing you can't get. You might meditate a lot, but the meditation is awesome and it's a great practice. And to bring that meditative quality into your life is fantastic. And there are things you just probably won't learn from meditating that you've got to learn from being in the trenches and putting this stuff into action in relationship with other people. I'm just quick into the questions here. Hi to the Philippines. And hello, I asked consultation inside email. If you want to work with me either in a small group coaching, or if you want to work with me one-on-one, I do have a couple of openings for that. I'm just going to put the link for that here. It's the same application form that comes through to me. And if I feel like we're a good fit, we would get on a call together. And I'm also letting people know about the Ask Jack community, which has just launched. And I think this is the link that will take you there for that. How come you know so much about this? Well, I guess there's Probably 2 or 3 short answers to that. One is I've had a lot of adult relationships that weren't always particularly effective. So I've just been there and done a lot of things that now I'm grateful that I get to work with people, and you can benefit from my personal struggle, because it's been a hard path for me, even at times where I wouldn't really acknowledge it was a hard path. From back in the day when I thought just being a guy who can relate and be heart open and connected to people was enough, and realizing, oh my God, there's so much to learn about how to really be and do intimate relationship. The other is that I've basically been in human development for 15 years, and I've coached full time for 7 years. And the vast majority of my clients I've worked with on relationship. So, I've kind of been there with people and seen things. And yeah, I've done my own studies and, in terms of the coaching and Enneagram and different wisdom traditions, but a lot of it actually comes from experience. And I learn pretty well in experience. That's how I tend to learn. I'm bookish enough. I did really well at university, blah, 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 but really life experience. Hey, Annette, great. Watch this when it's finished. You're welcome. I'm glad I get the opportunity to share. Yvette says, I thought I had sorted so much out in this last year, but I've just met someone who I felt a connection with, and here are them as all insecurities, anxieties, and doubts already. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of it. I think it's both and, right? Both. I've been doing this work, and sometimes when we come into contact with a situation or someone that we're interested in, anxieties and doubts come up. It's not that it's about never having them. It's about how to be with them, right? And how much, if you think of your doubt as a structure that kind of contracts and hijacks your openness in your head center, right? So doubt is contracting, it's fearful, it's closing. If you want to be engaged in life, most people either get out of that problem by just disengaging from life and going and living up on the mountain, right, so to speak, or you actually learn how to presence your doubt and be with it. It's not that it's never not going to be there. It's more that you get less hijacked over time. The volume of the hijack, the frequency of the hijack. That's how I'd encourage you to think about doubt. And until your nervous system is in a somewhat co-regulated, bonded, secure attachment with someone, probably at times in your experiences of dating, it's going to be activated, and it might not feel that good. I'm all for people feeling good when they feel good. I'm not for people making themselves feel bad for when they don't feel good. You know what I mean? So a lot of life is about learning how to be with your experience. And there's a kind of freedom, I'm not saying I'm always here, even in my marriage, but there's a kind of freedom when you free yourself from feeling good or bad, right? That it's actually okay. Sometimes I feel good. Sometimes I feel bad. Sometimes I feel secure. Sometimes I feel insecure. I welcome it all, and I try and learn from it as best I can, but I reduce the background secondary experience noise. So I don't make myself wrong. I don't beat up on myself. I don't tell myself I shouldn't be having this experience. Until certain things are healed, you keep having that experience. And sometimes you have to go around that hamster wheel a lot in order to realize, oh, there was some other undistinguished factor that's actually been contributing to this, which now finally I might get to see, and then something else might start to relax in me, But if you want to be in relationship, of course, we all want the yummy cuddle, snuggled up on the sofa watching Netflix or going out and having romantic adventure and travel. Awesome. It includes that. But relationship isn't only that, right? Relationship is also this stodgy, sticky, difficult, two people trying to be authentic together, your needs, my needs, your regulation, my regulation. There's a lot going on in that space, particularly for those of us for whom relationship is our edge of learning and development. And I think that number is growing. I think most of us here right now live, relationship is going to be a big part of our path, even if that path is a really tricky, windy path. And I know in the past, definitely it's been that for me, and sometimes it still is. So it's like embracing that and realizing, wow, this is life working me. This is my gym, so to speak. This is where I go to work out. And for some people, it's not that. They settle down and their relationship has challenges at times, but it's not like it's their main edge of learning. For some people, it's diet, health, pain, loss, family, work, career, money. There's all sorts of ways that life will teach us the things that maybe we want to learn. We came here to learn, however you think of that, and to not shy away from it. Hello. If you want to coach with me, you fill out the application. I don't give people my number. Thanks for asking, though. Yes, being in the moment, the uncomfortableness, and still navigating in a productive way. Yeah, absolutely. Is it a good idea to avoid dating when you're uncertain what you want out of a relationship? Should I spend more time with myself to figure out what that may be? So that's a good question. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. My observation is that most of us at pretty much every stage, we want connection, whether we're available for a committed relationship or not. And so I think there is a whole pool of people who that's what they want. They're actually not available for something more, but they have connection needs, whether that's just, meeting someone intellectually, whether that's, physical touch needs, whether that's more intimate or sexual things, or just companionship. And I think what can be powerful is to be able to articulate that you either, if you do know what you want, which is, hey, something low key, something uncommitted, or I just want some, a snuggle buddy, someone to hang out with occasionally, or a companion. I actually don't want anything sexual. I just want a friend that can kind of drop in with me. To be able to articulate that is powerful. And if you really don't know, I think that's just what you articulate to someone. You just say, hey, I really don't know. So, all bets are off. Let's just take this kind of moment by moment, connection by connection. So that's totally fine. So let me see if there are any more questions here. Hey, Sharon. Thanks for that reply, Yvette. So does this coincide with quantum dating? Is this more when you start to get closer to exclusivity, or does it apply to both? I'm not actually familiar. It's not a naming I use, quantum dating. So you might just have to let me know what you mean by that. And you're welcome for the response. Let me know if you have any other questions. I'm going to be around here for probably another 5 minutes or so. I'm just going to post this link again if you're new here and you want to come and spend time with me on a more regular basis, and letting you know about my Ask Jack community. You can click that link and find out more about it. I appreciate these questions. They've been good questions. One of the reasons I'm inviting you to join me in this community is just because we can go deeper, and I can actually bring you on. And if there is, at the moment, the group is small enough that I can actually give you individualized attention. Moment by moment, what if he wants more and you don't? Well, I think you have your right to not want more. I think two people have a right to want different things, and that's okay. Just because I want something doesn't mean it has to be fulfilled. There's a lot of freedom in life in being able to declare my wants and be okay when they're not fulfilled. So I don't think it's life's job to fulfill every want. It seems to me what you're probably pointing to is boundaries, right? So what would come up for you if you noticed that the person you're in a relationship with or connecting with wants more than you? What comes up for you if you say, hey, actually, I don't want that. Hey, actually, that's enough, or that's my boundary, or I've seen you enough and I want to take some time on my own. Sometimes we have to kind of deal with that, right? We have to learn what it's like to disappoint, to frustrate, to make it okay that two people want different things. Sometimes you have the other person kind of cast back on themselves, right? So if I have an issue with you not wanting the thing that I want, I might have to do some of my own growth there to realize, oh, actually, I don't like it when you frustrate my wants. I have maybe some covert expectation that you should want the same thing as me, or I haven't differentiated enough from you to realize that we may want different things. So I think that's all important development for two people. Now, obviously, to make a relationship work, I think there are these territories where we both get to name our desires, and we might have to learn how to find the sort of the path of mutuality through that, right? Which is that sometimes our desires might be completely divergent, right? You might want to have a holiday by the beach, and I might want to have a holiday that's completely urban and involve walking tours. And maybe we have to find a way to either have a little bit of separate holiday, or you come on my terrain and I come on your terrain, and we kind of negotiate it. And I think that's a lot of the skill of being in relationship. That if you name something to me, I try and acknowledge that your desires are legitimate, even if your desires are very different from my own. And even if I'm a little afraid in this moment that I don't even know how to meet your desires because they're so different than mine, or because they seem diametrically opposed. And I've got some fear in that moment. That's okay. That's called being in relationship. And that's called, wow, we're going to have to sit down and figure some of this stuff out. And it may not be very easy to sit down and figure it out. So that's sometimes the rub of two people growing. And over time, I think what happens if you can stick in the process is you actually learn how to value and potentially want more things, because you get, oh, this person really likes and wants this thing. Like, let me try and understand it a bit more. Let me kind of really get why they might want that, and see it as less of a opposition or of a threat. And I think there's a way to authentically compromise, which is, hey, I now want this thing because you want it, and I want to be in relationship with you. If you're in that more kind of partnership relationship, I don't know if that's the kind of context that you're talking about, which might be a bit more of a dating, like, hey, you're making advances, I actually want to not do that. And I think just getting good at saying no and just realizing, you have a right to know. And particularly if here's what's sometimes difficult is that if people don't have good boundaries, initially when they go to assert their boundaries, they maybe do it in quite a kind of pushy or demanding or resentful way. And sometimes what I've seen is that then other people respond and get a bit triggered by that. And it reinforces a belief, oh, there you go. No, I don't get to have my boundaries. I don't get to have my no. And it might be you have to stick at that process enough to get it to the point where it's kind of clean in you enough that when you say, hey, no thanks, it's not, hey, no thanks. It's, hey, no thanks. Yeah, I'm not available for that. I like that you want that with me. I'm not available for that. I like that you asked, and I'd love it if you can hear me as I say no to this. Right? So you actually, you get sort of less, it's like you're more truly assertive because you're not pushily assertive. Something like that can come up for people. So let me just look here. How do you not drop the level of attraction after falling in love? Well, there's people who've studied this in more detail than I have, but a lot of people talk about stages of relationship, from a sort of a lust, like an initial attraction, a lot of which is kind of chemistry and sexual, through to romantic infatuation, which is often that experience of it falling in love and I'm intoxicated and I can't stop thinking about you, through to, some kind of mature love or pair bonding, which for most of us does have a different quality. And it's not the same as that romantic infatuation. You may have moments of that where you're just like, wow, I feel so enamored of you. I'm so in love with you. That's awesome. But I wouldn't expect it to be any kind of ongoing orientation, other than when it is there, enjoy it. But I don't think there's necessarily a need to make it there. Now, obviously, the more you have moments of connection, the more you share experiences that you both enjoy, the more you connect in times when you're not stressed and you can actually be available for one another, that will probably increase the likelihood of some of those feelings. But I think a lot of distinguishing high school love from mature love, so to speak, is actually, I realize that the high school love has the fantasy that we're going to stay in romantic infatuation. And it's very naive about what does it actually take to be long-term in partnership and in a mature kind of love with someone, which also includes, by the way, loving their dark. And when you're in romantic infatuation, you don't even notice the person has a dark side, mostly, right? You're mostly like, wow, they're so this, they're so that, we connect in this way. It's all on the up. And a lot of people fall off that afterwards, and they can't actually stabilize a relationship because they were so high. They didn't realize there was a downside. They didn't realize their partner had limitations, foibles, wounds, frailties, defenses, attachment wounds, all these things that pretty much any of us has. So, my essence of my sort of flavor in this work is much more the flavor of sobriety, of how can you be with what is, how can you be real, and let's try and create a real relationship with all the pitfalls and bumps that is likely to have, rather than keep people in this place of perhaps wanting something that maybe isn't actually going to be available, and therefore creates pain and actually creates dysfunction. The guy who friend zoned is now leaning back into I like you a lot, finding some common ground. Yeah. Well, I would trust yourself and your intuition in that situation. Typically, when a guy friend zones you, in my experience, it's not that common that you then really become the right ones for each other. Like normally there's a little bit of a knowing of like, this is someone I would want something with that's more than just friends. Sometimes that guy just wants connection, and he's lonely at times and gets that you would be a good source of connection. That may mean nothing about actually his desire to be in a real relationship with you. So I think that's also distinguishing what you want. All of us want connection. And as guys, we want connection. We want connection whether we're in relationship or single. And I think there are times when that connection has us kind of hit up a list of people who are sort of in that friend plus zone. And that's kind of where it can get a bit icky for people if they're wanting more. And actually the guy, and it can be vice versa, but in this instance, the guy is kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of hitting you up for connection, but there's nothing that's going to be ongoing, intimate or commitment about this. That zone is sometimes where people get hurt if they build expectations beyond what's actually available. Quantum dating, by keeping on a level of light and airy while you get to know a few people at the same time, so it gives you plenty of space to see who you really vibe with or connect more with. Okay, fair enough. I can see that approach. I tell you what I'm a fan of is knowing, right? Is really trying to tap into, hey, what's my deeper intuition about this person? And sometimes if people have got a number of connections going on, I wonder if it supports that knowing. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but that would be my sort of practical inquiry about that. The lizard part of our brain can really screw things up sometimes. Yeah, and I'll totally own that. My lizard is sometimes a bit crazier than I would like to admit. But I think a big part of it is, again, getting to befriend yourself there rather than kind of worrying about it or wishing it were different. So greetings from Jamaica. Thank you. The shadow side of your partner is hard to see in that infatuation level. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that we're meant to. I don't know that it's even possible to. It's just acknowledging, it's a bit like, and maybe this isn't the right analogy, but if you go down the pub or the bar and you get drunk, there's certain things that are really cool about that. And there's certain decisions you wouldn't want to make when you're in that state. And I think it's a similar thing with this arc of love, where it's like after the infatuation, then the sobriety, then the clarity. And sometimes that's all it was. You had a romantic infatuation with someone, and that was going to be the extent of that relationship. And that's really hard because you've got all this love gushing through you, but it's not necessarily to do with, well, what's the real compatibility in this relationship? I think it's one of the most mysterious things about love in some ways, is that the falling in love can happen with lots of people, and it just doesn't really mean much when it comes to real compatibility. Is there a way to include the dark side and still feel in love? Yeah, I think there is, in the sense that you can really love on someone's dark side, right? When if we were in a relationship, when I do that stupid thing, you could still be loving towards me there. It just may not be that there's a feeling quality of feeling in love that I don't necessarily think for the vast majority of us has a constancy. It's more like a coming and a going and a to and a fro. And I think being in relationship with that is important. Part of authentically feeling things is you're feeling them as they come up, and you're not trying to make them different. When you're sad, you're sad. When you're happy, you're happy. When you're exasperated, you're exasperated. When you feel in love, you feel in love. And sometimes it can be as true when you're in that romantic infatuation stage to say, oh, there's a feeling of love here right now, maybe even more true than I love you in particular, right? It might be that person is very particularly the person you love, or it might be that the kind of alchemical mix and the chemistry is bringing up a feeling in you that you really, really like. I'm just saying, don't attach to it. I live in Boulder, Colorado. How do you help distinguish the dark side from the toxic relating? How do you distinguish the dark side from toxic relating? Well, so my sense is that we all have a dark side, right? By which I mean, either things that we haven't sort of brought fully into the light, right? Where we might have an outdated strategy from childhood or earlier relationships, places that we kind of contract, but we don't even acknowledge we do, places where we're fearful, but we front it with anger. We've all got these sort of unconscious strategies running, right? And the more we do work, hopefully the less that's true. But for most of us, we're not finished that work. So partly, I think it's just acknowledging we all have that. Now, toxic relationship is, in some ways that's a bit of an essentially contested concept. I don't know if there's one just standard definition of that. But toxic relationship might be like, oh, well, we keep hitting a pattern that we don't really have any way of making better. We're not really able to work through it, or that someone is keeping you in a very fixed emotional distance, or the orientation they have to relationship isn't one that really is tending towards longer term commitment. So there's this very kind of hot and cold nature to it. Whether you call that toxic or not, my sense is to stay in touch with your own guidance about relationship, right? Your own higher self, your own kind of information to yourself. Most of us, and I include myself here sometimes, it's easy to get away from ourselves when we're in a relationship, right? It's easy to be a bit over there with the other person, or it's easy to be kind of caught up in something, and we sort of lose our own center. And that, I think, is as much of a risk as anything when it comes to relationship, is that you start to lose access to your own higher conversation with yourself. Now, toxic, bad behavior. Yeah, I don't know that there's a definitive line there. Obviously, if someone's being ongoingly abusive to you, that's not okay. Obviously, for a lot of us, relationships will bring up areas of conflict, right? And we might not be at our prettiest when that conflict happens. I think it's a little bit about the intention. And I also think it's a little bit about what happens when we are more regulated, right? Some couples, you can fight and you can fight bad, but what happens when the dust settles? Can you kind of come back? Is there some sense of saying, hey, that thing I did, that wasn't good, that wasn't cool, I'm sorry. That there's a sort of ongoing sort of healthy benevolence in the attitude to the relationship, even while some of these things work themselves out. It can be a little difficult to make that discernment sometimes. I think what it comes down to for a lot of us is that there's someone that you can look across the table and say, I've got my work, you've got your work, and we're going to do this work together, and we want to do this work together, right? That we want to do this work together, of becoming more free, of becoming more ourselves, of becoming more loving and powerful. And that mutuality can take you a long way, I think, because what you're saying is, I'm going to see you in some pretty shitty ways, right? I'm going to see you in some places that you may not show other people. They may not even know you there. You might have had friends you've had for 20 years that you've never had a confrontation with that's really sticky and conflicting. And we're probably going to go there. And that's a kind of sacred contract in some ways, to really want to do that with someone. I hope for each of us that we find someone that kind of wants to do that work with us. What's part of compatibility? You're going to have to remind me what that is. I was distinguishing chemistry from compatibility. Maybe that was a bit. I would agree with you on the knowing. If you spread your attention between too many for too long, you're not really giving any 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes that can be a subtle strategy of avoidance. That's what we've got to be careful of. It can also sometimes be a subtle strategy of, I kind of smile at this. I used to do, put this on paper, these different people I'm connecting with, and come up with some kind of weighted scoring system, or basically try and figure it out who would be the person to be in relationship with, rather than, do I have any knowing here? And I might not have any knowing about any of them, but let's not get away from the knowing. We don't need to overanalyze these things. How do I pick the right best man for me? There are a few men who's trying to be my boyfriend and they're good men. So I think that's a heart and a gut thing, right? I think that there's a part in you at times, and it might be one to cultivate, that actually knows the answer to that question, or that can know the answer to that question over time. You may have heard me say this, but I think it's really powerful, is, when you know, and when you don't know, that's it, you don't know. So what we're looking for is some kind of knowing, and it may be there on day one, it may be there on week one, it may be there on month one, it may be there on year one, it may be taking longer than that. But at some point you might have a knowing like, this one. That doesn't necessarily guarantee the relationship's going to work out. It might be that it's a relationship for a season, but there's a sort of knowing like, this is where I think I'm meant to put my attention. Now, in some seasons, it's not actually right to do that. You're not really in a season where singling and kind of settling into a relationship with one person is what's being called for. That's why your knowing and your guidance is so important, because it lets you know, one season is not the next. The rules of summer are not the rules of winter. And I think that's the best way to orient to these things. Particularly if you've got several people that are good people. There's lots of good people. There's lots of good men. And it might be that there are even, several good men that are ones that you could easily be as your long-term, partner. And it kind of comes down to like, what's your intuition about this? And what is their intuition about this? Because there's no substitute for a guy saying, I really want to be in a relationship with you. I think you're my person. And, he may be right or wrong about that. But over time, if that's something that kind of grows into a kind of a groove and a commitment, that's just really powerful. Two people that actually say, I want you to be my person. Let's see if we can do this. But I think get out of your head. And if you don't know, just enjoy that you don't know. Enjoy the mystery of not knowing, and not knowing kind of which horse to back, so to speak. How do you get over never feeling good enough for someone? Okay, so the essence of not feeling good enough for someone, I would just take them out of the equation for a moment and just notice, can you feel good enough for yourself? Because mostly if you can feel good enough for yourself and you know that enough, you might occasionally get activated by someone who has a superiority or an inferiority complex, but mostly you'll be okay. Mostly you'll know yourself, you'll know your worth, you'll know your value. Now, why do people not know that? Generally, it's because they have a strong inner critic. So I'd invite you to do some work on your inner critic. And mostly if other people are having the impact that you don't feel good enough, and that's something that's being done a little bit on their side of the fence as well, it's because they have strong inner critics, right? Most people who walk around saying, I'm a really high value person with really high standards, it's a little bit of nuance in that territory, but often that just means, yeah, I kind of punish myself all day long to be a really amazing person, driving myself crazy that I'm never good enough. And never good enough gets you a lot of results in life in certain ways, right? You only got to look at a lot of hardcore professional athletes that are super freaking tough on themselves. It works in terms of motivating you to beat your own ass, but it's not great when it comes to being loving of yourself and other people in an intimate relationship. So it invites a conversation about standards. I remember 10 years ago, I had my first integral coach that coached me, and he really got me to look into my standards. And I was always like, well, my standards, that's who I am. That's my identity. That's why I achieve these things. That's why I have such a strong mission in the world. And after a while, I got to see like, oh yeah, my standards, I can just impose them on me and other people. It's a way of just not loving me in this present moment, but it's kind of wrapped up in this whole sort of narrative of performance. So that's the short answer to that in my view. All right, I'm gonna just see if there are any other questions here. Compassion with your flaws, absolutely. Men are afraid of commitment. The further along in the date, the more I realize there's no value of commitment left. I mean, you know, I advise people against global beliefs about men or women or anything, you know, so men are, women are, life is. Of course, there's lots of men that are afraid of commitment. Of course, there are lots of men that also want to step into commitment. Generally, even the men that really are reluctant to step into commitment, sometimes there's a kind of integrity in that of like, I really don't know, or I'm really not sure, and I want to actually be able to stand behind my commitments. Most men, if you strip it down, their highest value is freedom. And of course, that's why commitment might be difficult. And in the immature masculine, freedom, commitment, is just a constraint on my freedom. You know, the terrible metaphor, right? In lots of cultures for a wife, the ball and chain, terrible metaphor. But it points to something that a lot of guys in their immature masculine kind of experience of just like, yeah, this is just an external constraint. Now, the more mature masculine internalizes the constraint and says, healthy freedom is about knowing my constraints. And I willingly choose this constraint of being with you because I want to deepen with you and I want to create something with you. That's what you want to look out for, really. And I think more and more men are coming into that mature masculine. It's just maybe taking a while. Call me Mel, please. Hi, Jack. Thank you. I know we had this before. Hello, Mel. Hi, Jack. I wonder if it's possible to be friends with an ex. I feel like I miss him as a person, not a partner, but I'm sure I feel myself. Yeah, that's such a relevant question, I'm sure, for lots of people. Just before I answer that, I see we've got a few more people on. I did come on. One of the things I wanted to let you know is that I have launched the Ask Jack community. I am just posting a link here to that community. We get together twice for live calls, twice a month, 90 to 120 minute calls, where there's a small group of us that we can engage and I can actually coach and answer your questions on a deeper level. If you're interested, click that link. You'll see an enrollment page. You can enroll. The next live call is the week after next. So can you be friends with an ex? Yes, you can be friends with an ex. Here's the rub though. You are much better being friends with an ex when you've moved through that kind of feeling of missing them. So until that happens, I would say, maybe you don't need to be friends with an ex, because it also just clarifies what's really going on. It can be really difficult with that. Like, I kind of miss them. I kind of miss the connection. I'm a fan of actually encouraging you to feel that a little bit, even though it's difficult, and let it metabolize out so that you are then available for something that's more true as a friendship. And it's not a sort of covert, are we still connected? Are there chords here? Do you want something? Do I want something? So I think take it out longer than you might imagine. Hey, Jack, ask how I do. I tell my daughter who's 16 and dating a lovely young guy, but he has abandonment issues, substance depression because of it. I don't want him to be dependent on her. Wow. Well, I love that you care about that. I don't want him to be dependent on her. Yeah, I mean, wow, 16. That's young. There's probably going to be a whole journey of learning about relationships. And I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to preach as if I were. My imagination is that you might just be able to drop a few things into her reality and see if there's an interest. If you want to look at anything that's to do with abandonment or attachment, but also, I think there are so many things that are so fragile at that age that I don't know if there's certain understandings that just you kind of have to go through the difficult mill of learning until they might come online. I would have thought just trying to be honest and without being pushy and just dropping things into her reality as best that you can. How can I develop a healthy relationship with an extremely emotional and overthinking guy? Do you think a guy can be both alpha and emotional at the same time? That's an interesting question. Do I think a guy can be alpha and emotional at the same time? Well, I actually think there's a really good TED talk actually about alpha, and the guy's done a lot of study, I think, both in human terms and animal terms, and his sort of misconception of alpha is just this kind of domineering person, when actually, where the phrase originally came from, I think from the animal world, the alpha male is actually really good at building relationships and maintaining the integrity and the loyalty of the group. So it's not just about domineering people, it's a lot about actually hearing them and making them feel safe and ensuring that we work better together. So I just throw that out there because sometimes there's different things that people mean by alpha. But I imagine a guy can be emotional and overthinking and alpha, that they could all be in the mix. I'm curious how much he wants to develop a healthy relationship with you, because that, I think, there's no substitute for that, right? Anytime you find yourself thinking, well, this person's like this and how can we sort of deal with that? It's like, well, what are they available for with you? And you want to be careful of, not getting into any kind of mentoring sort of style of relationship. There can be certain relationships that are beautiful, and really, if we took a step back, it is a bit more of a mentor and a mentee. Maybe you've had one of those where it's all about your learning, or you really impart some learning to another person. That can be beautiful. But if you want a real partnership, you kind of want it on that equal footing. And so you have to be mindful of suggesting work to someone, right? It can be so much more powerful if people come to their own desire, like, oh, I notice I'm overthinking. What am I going to do about that? Now you can reflect, hey, maybe you seem to be in your head sometimes, or you can, really try and bring a guy's attention into his body by just taking him into his body and by connecting with his body. And that can be super powerful. I guess my follow-up question would be, well, what is the impact on you when this guy is really emotional, say? Like, what's coming up for you? We're at 7 months of dating and he mumbled a negative thing to do with marriage, relating back to his bad childhood. We've never been married. We're both over 40. Could he change? So one thing that I have observed is that there's some people who can do committed partnership. They're just not up for marriage. So you might want to just distinguish those things. Sometimes people can see themselves being with someone long term, but they just, marriage, either like it didn't work for them previously, or it didn't work for their parents, or they have some connotations around it that doesn't work for them. So I'd get clear about that. I'd also get clear about being able to articulate for yourself, if you do want to get married or be in a committed partnership, just what that really means for you. What's important about that, so that the other person really has your reality about it. And yeah, I mean, people can evolve in all sorts of ways. I mean, humans are incredibly elastic. There's nothing more powerful than wanting to change. So that would be a little bit of my curiosity. And I'd also, when you're in a connected space, and I know this can be difficult. I know sometimes as guys, we can be difficult to get into this space, but I'm such a fan of people having the real conversations. So if your view of what I think of marriage is based upon something I mumbled several months ago, I would prefer that you had at least clarity of what I really think and where I really stand. And those conversations can be difficult and tense and confronting, but something as important as this, I think you have a right, if you've been with someone long term, to at least know where each other stands. So if you could create a space where you can talk to each other non-judgmentally, I think that would be super powerful. I'm just trying to keep from settling. Yeah, you don't want to settle. I agree, and it's such a balance, because there's this paradox of not wanting to settle, which I think means being true to your heart, right? When you actually know, I want to be with this person. There's a kind of truth in most of us from a heart level that you want to honor. So I think that's important, but there also becomes this time sometimes where for some people they learn how, like, oh, if I actually relax into the fact that we're all fucked up in some ways, right? Excuse my French, but we're all hurt, wounded, problematized, have complexities, have incongruities, have parts of us that are fragmented and disown, you kind of get that, every human, even the ones that would most want you to believe that they have all their shit together, particularly those ones, that is all running in the background, right? So if I'm right about that, then part of coming together with someone is kind of realizing, look, yeah, like there's going to be some weirdness here sometimes. There's going to be some ways that you're strange and I'm strange, and let's be strange together. So that can sometimes be part of the settling, where there's sometimes this impossible standard that's sort of projected out a little bit, like, oh, at some point I will meet that right person. And it can be true that you just haven't met the right person. It can be true that you're not in the season yet, and at some point you get into a season where settling down makes sense for you. And sometimes it's like, oh, I actually learned that as I chill on myself and give myself less of a hard time, I can chill out on another person and let them be human and frail and vulnerable and weird and strange and lack integrity in a few ways that you can just forgive them for, because that's what it's like mostly, I think, to be a real human, right? Rather than this idealized self that we often try and live up to or have other people see in us. I'm glad you're getting a lot from this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If some of you have joined us new, too many exes try to be friends. It can get messy. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I have it both ways. I have some exes. I don't have any exes that I'm super tight with. I have exes that I definitely would say are in my friends, and I have exes that it's kind of done. And for one reason or another, someone doesn't want to be in touch, and actually just to respect that sometimes that's what's really needed. And I definitely have had that experience before of a kind of a longing for the person where I'm like, oh, I think we're still friends, but it's like, no, because I don't really long after my friend. I might occasionally wish they were around more, but I don't tend to have like a longing in my heart in this kind of like overpouring kind of way. And so that's a little bit of a heads up. That's what it was for me. What's the best age of a man to commit? I think the best age of a man to commit isn't an age number. It's a stage thing. It's actually to do with the stage of his life that he's at, and maybe the stage of his masculine development. And I think most men know when that time comes. And for some men, it's in their 20s, and for some men, it's in their 40s, and for some men, it was in their 30s, and then they had a partnership, and then that dissolved, and then it comes around again in their mid-late 50s or later, and there's plenty of men in their 60s that are commitment phobes, right? So it's more about where am I actually at in my own development. And also for a lot of men, it's to do with their mission and their career and their purpose. And when that's somewhat on track, it more makes sense for them to be in a committed partnership. When they're still like, I'm figuring myself out, I don't really know who I am, I don't really know how to make money, I don't really know what I'm doing. That's a really hard stage for a lot of men to partner. Now, sometimes they will, but it just might not be coming from the best place, right? It might be like a little bit of a substitution, or they're making the relationship more important than these other things that they probably need to figure out a little bit for themselves. I definitely think there's a stage where men really come more into themselves, and they kind of drop the pretense, and they're okay being who they are, whether that's a super warrior-like guy or a very heartfelt, open guy, or anything in between, that they just kind of own, this is who I am, really. And of course, I'm growing and evolving, but there's a little bit of a kind of take me or leave me. And those guys are quite good to partner with in some ways, because they kind of know who they are, and they're not trying to bend over and pretend or, kind of get bent out of shape too much. Hello from Germany. Hello from Portugal. When a guy says he's relationship trauma because he cannot, should I assume he's emotionally unavailable for a partnership if he says he has relationship trauma? Yeah. I mean, if I was dating and going around saying pretty early in dating I have relationship trauma, I'm not going to imagine I'm in necessarily the best place for a partnership. That just seems like, I mean, who knows? There's a lot of nuance I'm not going to pick up through that question, but that would be my intuition, that a guy, when he's a little bit more settled in himself, that's probably not what he's going to lead with. I want him to marry me. Thank you. Don't know. Do you think it's great measure to see how someone actually deals with their emotional state, so you don't judge too quickly? Yeah, I definitely think you want to see how people deal with different emotional states. And it's also why things like traveling with a potential partner is really powerful, because suddenly I'm not just in the day-to-day of my kind of routinized life. It's like problems and unexpected things and delays and accommodation and all that. And there's things you just can see and learn about each other. So I'm quite a fan of that. What's your stance on pursuing a rebound relationship when you're still dealing with the grief of a breakup? So I have a video on breakup, which if you haven't seen, I'd encourage you. It's something like, if you search Jack Butler heartache, it will come up. I'm definitely a fan of people feeling and metabolizing their own grief. So what I mean by that is whether you go into a relationship with someone else or not, you have to do that work, I think. And if you don't, eventually it pops out somewhere else in the future. So no substitute for that. Sometimes you need a relationship to move on. I mean, that can be true as well, or it really helps. I think it's just good to be open with the other person. Like, hey, I'm still grieving a little bit. I'm a bit on a recoil or a rebound, just so we're kind of awares. And even then, sometimes you can tell people, and it can be really hard to take that in if they've got feelings for you. But I think just transparent communication as best you can, and don't believe yourself too much. If you're on a rebound and you start to get really interested in someone, just kind of keep that awareness that, I'm in a rebound, so I may not really know what's going on at the moment. Hello. Welcome. How do you ask about being exclusive? Trying, taking a risk. Could you give an example? Yeah. So, maybe ideally for a lot of women, they would like the guy to lead that conversation, because it can be quite cool, right? If a guy says, hey, I'm kind of into you and I would love you to be my girlfriend and maybe we can be exclusive together. So that's maybe like the ideal for a lot of people. Now, if that's not forthcoming, I would just say don't have the conversation too prematurely, because sometimes I've seen situations where the guy might be willing to agree to be exclusive, but it's not really, you can't really take too much store of what that really means. It might mean he's willing to be exclusive, but don't make that mean like, oh, so he really sees this as like, we're in this partnership and this is like the most, committed relationship or something like that. So I think it can be good to find its natural flow from either of you, but sort of, not too prematurely. And you get to have what you want around that. So you don't have to take that from me if you want to have that conversation earlier. But just, I've seen it where people, particularly if you've got anxious style attachment, you kind of want that exclusivity because you're kind of pushing for that kind of early. And you're like, hang on a minute, I've only been on 3 dates with this guy. And what I might want to do is chill out and let it unfold, and then see if that's a natural impulse for him, because there's nothing quite as a substitute from having him being like, yeah, actually, I don't want you to see other people because I really want to be with you. So I think that's what you hold out for. Now, if you've held out and that's not happening, maybe you just table it and say, hey, I'd love to just have a check-in about our relationship and where we're at and what we want from each other and whether we want any agreements, because that's another way of talking about it. And I would try as much as possible and listen to the gestalt of that conversation, not just the words, because there's plenty of guys that might be willing to, because you've kind of brought it up, to sort of be like, yeah, okay, this and that, we can have this kind of agreement. Agreements are great, but just take a step back and listen to the gestalt of it. Is this someone that wants to be in agreements with you? Or is it that they're kind of doing it as a condition of because you put it on the table? And I'm not making that wrong. I'm just saying be able to distinguish them, because I think it will serve you. You're welcome. I'm glad you find my videos beautiful. Thank you. 3 months and we were over 60. The exclusive, 3 months. Yeah, I mean, I think that's okay to bring up. Just try and do it if you can as non-judgmentally and as openly as possible, so that you can really hear, if you can, what's going on. The man is kind of the one who decides usually, right? Commitment-wise, from your experience. Not that the man has to decide, just that I think a lot of women like it when he does, like want to move in that direction. If that's true for you, obviously if it's not, then that's not much of interest. But it's like a lot of things with men. I think the ideal is just that there's enough of a naturally occurring impulse of like, hey, I want to go on some dates with you. Hey, I would like you to be my girlfriend. Hey, I would be honored if you would be my wife. And I think a lot of people really like that. They like that kind of initiation from a guy. Now, not every combination has it. You might be, much more the person who has that kind of initiative and wants to make those kind of proposals, and that would feel good to you. Absolutely, each to their own. Just saying that's generalistically what I've seen people like. And if you start to kind of knock on the door prematurely, the guy might respond to that because he's like, oh, I don't want you to feel unsafe. I don't want you. Okay, yeah, okay, I'll be exclusive with you. But it's not the same as like I've really thought this through. Come to my heart's view of this. Yeah, agreements is a good way of talking about it. Good day to Australia. I think I could only trust him if he brought it up himself. Then he's interesting. But yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. All right, guys. I've stayed here a little bit longer than I was going to. I love these questions. Thanks so much. I'm going to post here again. This is the link to the Ask Jack community. This is where we get to go deeper with these kind of questions, and I get to bring you on camera and be with you one-on-one and with a group. And Just to kind of give you the overall of what happens there, we have 2 live calls a month. Occasionally, I'll put an additional call in if you're not on a time zone where those calls work. We also have an exclusive Facebook community, and I also create exclusive content for the Ask Jack community that is not available on YouTube or anywhere else. So if you kind of like the stuff that I'm putting down here, if you think having me in your corner would be helpful to you and your love life and your relationship life, and you like working with me, I'd be honored if you would consider to come and join us in that. You can click that link. When you do, you'll get a full description of everything that's involved, and you can just click the button there, and it's a subscription thing. Cancel anytime. You just pay for the month ahead, and we've gotten off to a great start. So thanks for all your questions. I appreciate we've had Europe, Asia, Australia, North America, pretty much every continent here. So thanks for getting involved, and I wish you guys a great start to your weekends. I'm Jack. Thanks for being here. Over and out. Thank you all.